The diner's fluorescent hum was the only sound as I watched Brenda laugh, her hand resting on the other man's arm. Our table, the one we always shared, lay empty. My own coffee cooled, untouched. She met my gaze, a flicker of something unreadable, then turned back, pulling the man closer. Some people just don't know when to let go, he murmured, his eyes dismissive. The last flicker of daylight left the sky as Dale Miller pulled his Ford F-150 into the driveway. His shoulders ached from a long day's wiring job for Anderson Electric. 12 hours running cable through hot attics and damp crawl spaces. He rubbed his temples as he walked to the front door, the familiar quiet of the house a stark contrast to the drilling and hammering he had left behind. Brenda's car, a silver Honda, was not in its usual spot. She was still in Columbus, attending a series of seminars she had insisted he not join. He tossed his keys onto the small table by the door. The house felt too still. He walked through the living room, the blinds drawn, casting the space in a dull gray light. He paused, then picked up his cell phone. Brenda had been gone since Tuesday morning. It was Thursday now. Her voice, when she answered, was higher pitched than usual, almost too cheerful. "Hey," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter. "How's the big city treating you?" "Oh, Dale, it's been so much," she replied, a faint hum of background noise like distant conversation. "My head is swimming with new theories." "Sounds like fun," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Maybe I should drive up tomorrow, crash your last day, surprise you." There was a slight pause. "Oh no, you don't want to do that," she said quickly, her tone firm, almost dismissive. "It's all very academic, very intense. You'd be bored stiff, truly. And I'm swamped. Every minute is scheduled." The smile faded from Dale's face. He knew she didn't want him there, had known it for weeks. Her insistence had been clear. "Right, too much excitement for a simple electrician," he mumbled. "Exactly," she said, though perhaps she hadn't caught his sarcasm. "Listen, before I forget, did I leave my small black travel bag in the bedroom? I can't find it. I swear I packed it, but I didn't see it in the car." Let me look." "Why," he said, walking down the short hallway to their bedroom. He flipped on the light. The room was tidy, as Brenda always kept it. He checked the floor, then the closet. Nothing. He scanned the dresser. There, nestled between her jewelry box and a stack of folded sweaters, was the small black bag. Next to it, her brown leather-bound journal, the one with the tarnished brass clasp, usually kept out of sight. "It's here," he said into the phone, "on the dresser." "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her relief palpable. "I must have just grabbed my main suitcase in the rush. Can you just leave it there? I'll get it when I get back." "Sure, anything else?" "No, that's everything. I've got to run. Another session starting. Long day ahead. Talk to you later, Dale." And then, before he could say another word, she hung up. He lowered the phone, the dial tone buzzing faintly in his ear. A small knot tightened in his stomach. The call had lasted less than 5 minutes. Her quick exit, the almost hurried tone when he joked about joining her, it all added to the vague unease that had been building for the past 2 months. Brenda, a sociology professor at the local college, had been distant, her usual warmth replaced by a focused, almost clinical demeanor. He walked back to the kitchen, contemplating dinner. Pizza. Brenda wasn't a fan of pizza. He ordered a large pepperoni and mushroom, a small indulgence in her absence. While he waited for it to arrive, he settled onto the worn armchair in the living room, flipping through channels. But his mind kept drifting, unable to settle. He thought about Brenda, her bright, energetic self, and how that self had slowly been replaced. He remembered her mentioning a new teaching assistant earlier in the semester, a young man named Chad Peterson. She'd said he was bright, sharp, very engaged in the material. Just a passing comment at dinner, nothing more. But now it surfaced in his mind. He also recalled her initial reaction when the Columbus seminar trip had first come up. "You should come with me, Dale," she'd said, almost an invitation. Then a week later, a complete reversal. "It's really not for you. You wouldn't enjoy it." It had felt like a door slamming shut. The pizza arrived, warm and smelling of garlic and oregano. He ate 2 slices, the taste flat in his mouth. After, with the television still murmuring, he decided to go to the bedroom and read. Maybe a novel would pull his thoughts away. He reached for the lamp switch. His gaze landed on the dresser again, the small black travel bag still sitting there. He'd told Brenda he'd leave it, but it seemed out of place, an anomaly in their otherwise organized room. He decided to put it back in the closet where it belonged. He picked up the bag. Beneath it, nestled against the wood, was Brenda's journal. It was usually kept in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, tucked beneath her lingerie. Its presence on the dresser was a small, unsettling detail. He picked up the journal. As he did, a faint, unfamiliar scent, something sweet and musky, like a cologne he didn't recognize, wafted up from the worn leather. His fingers tightened around the small book. A quiet itch began in his mind, growing, becoming more insistent. Brenda had always been private about this journal, calling it her academic thoughts, her personal reflections. He'd never touched it, never tried to open it. He hesitated, his thumb tracing the cold brass clasp. The unfamiliar scent was still there, clinging to the leather. A cold knot formed, deep in his stomach. The journal lay on the nightstand, its brass clasp glinting faintly in the moon's weak light. Dale had put it down, but the image of it, locked and unyielding, remained behind his eyes. The unfamiliar scent still lingered in the air, a whisper of something alien in their shared space. Sleep came late, interrupted by restless turns, his mind replaying Brenda's hurried voice, the distant hum in the background of their call. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the small, dark leather book, its lock a silent challenge. The next morning, the hum of fluorescent lights at the Anderson Electric warehouse did little to distract him. He moved through his tasks, checking inventory, preparing for the day's installations, but his focus felt fractured. His thoughts drifted to Brenda, to her sudden distance over the last 2 months, to her firm refusal to let him join her in Columbus. These small shifts in her behavior, once easily dismissed, now felt like cracks in a foundation he had always considered solid. Gary Olson, his supervisor, a man whose graying hair matched his uniform, leaned against a stack of conduit pipes. "Morning, Dale. Everything squared away?" "Morning, Gary. Just about." Dale picked up a coil of wire, his hands working on autopilot. "My Janine, she's off to that quilt show in Wisconsin next month," Gary said, a slight smile on his face. "Wanted me to drive her, but I told her, 'Honey, you know I can't stand looking at fabric for more than 5 minutes.' She just laughed. Always good to get away for a bit, I guess." Dale nodded, forcing a small smile. "Brenda's in Columbus. Seminars. Said it was all business. No fun. Brenda's always on the go, isn't she?" Gary chuckled. "My Janine, she'd never go anywhere without me if she had a choice. Says it's lonely. But Brenda, she's a modern woman. Independent. Good for her, I guess." The casual words meant his light conversation inadvertently sharpened Dale's own suspicions. Janine, with her constant need for company, was the opposite of Brenda's recent self-sufficiency. He finished the conversation, the unease tightening its grip. During his lunch break, Dale pulled out his phone. He tried Brenda's number, hoping for a longer, less rushed conversation. The phone rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Brenda Sutton. I'm currently unavailable. Please leave a message." Her voice, recorded and calm, held none of the forced cheerfulness of their last call. She rarely let calls go to voicemail. He pressed the red button, ending the call without leaving a message. He replayed their brief Thursday conversation in his head. The upbeat tone that felt just a little too bright, the quick refusal of his offer to join, the abrupt goodbye. When Dale finally got home, the house felt even quieter than the night before. He changed into a t-shirt and jeans, then walked into the bedroom. He noticed the small things first. On Brenda's dresser, her usual bottle of expensive perfume, a scent she only used sparingly for special occasions, was half empty. It usually lasted months. Next to his own nightstand, the brand new book he had bought her for the trip, a novel she had mentioned wanting to read, still lay unopened, its spine uncreased. She hadn't even packed it. His gaze fell to the journal still on his nightstand. The cold dread returned, prickling at his skin. To break the lock, to force his way into her private thoughts, felt like a violation. But the alternative, to live with this gnawing uncertainty, these quiet suspicions, felt worse. A deep conflict brewed inside him, respect for privacy warring with a desperate need for truth. He looked at the journal, then at Brenda's old mahogany jewelry box, a gift from her grandmother, which sat on her dresser. It had a delicate silver clasp but no obvious keyhole. He started opening drawers, his hands a little shaky. He felt for a loose panel, a hidden compartment. Nothing. Then, almost hidden beneath a coil of costume pearls in the top tray, he saw it. A tiny, ornate silver key, no bigger than his thumbnail. It looked too small, too decorative to be functional, but its shape, with its delicate, intricate cut, seemed to match the journal's tiny lock. His breath caught. He picked up the key, his fingers brushing against its cold metal. He walked back to the nightstand, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He inserted the key into the lock. It slid in smoothly. He twisted it, a soft, almost imperceptible click, echoing in the sudden silence of the room. The brass clasp sprang open. Brenda's neat, elegant handwriting filled the first page he saw. The first entry was about a departmental meeting, a new proposal for a course, seemingly innocuous. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the page, then another, his eyes scanning for anything amiss, anything out of place. He found an entry dated early last week, written with an unusual intensity. So much excitement for Columbus. This trip feels different, like a fresh start, a chance to truly connect. Connect with whom? Then a few pages later, the name appeared. Chad Peterson. He truly understands the nuances of critical theory. Our discussions are always so stimulating. The way he looks at me when I explain a complex idea, he gets it. Another entry, just a day before she left for Columbus. Chad and I had coffee again after office hours. His insights are always so valuable. I feel such a strong intellectual connection. It's exhilarating. Dale's world began to tilt. The words, simple and direct, felt like physical blows. Intellectual connection. Exhilarating. The quiet of his home, once a comfort, suddenly became deafening, filled with the echo of Brenda's words on the page. Dale continued to read, each word striking him like a hammer blow. The neat, precise handwriting that had once seemed so familiar, so intrinsically Brenda, now felt like the deliberate script of a stranger. The entries detailed a series of clandestine meetings. Lunch dates turned into long, hushed conversations in out-of-the-way coffee shops. Late-night calls after he had already gone to bed, or when he was at work. Casual office hours extending into stolen hours, away from the campus. The affair, he learned, had not begun suddenly. It was a slow burn, kindled over months, intensifying as Chad Peterson's graduation approached. Chad's leaving soon, one entry read, and I feel a strange panic. What will I do without his presence? This intellectual connection, this understanding we share, it's become vital. Then, a more recent entry, dated just a week before her departure for Columbus. This seminar trip is a perfect cover. 3 days, uninterrupted, no prying eyes. Prying. It feels reckless, exhilarating. We deserve this. The seminars, the intense academic schedule, the reason she'd so firmly dismissed his offer to join her, it was all a pretense. A carefully constructed lie to spend uninterrupted time with Chad. The realization hit him with a cold, sickening force. He read entries expressing Brenda's guilt, brief flashes of remorse amidst pages filled with a fervent, almost desperate passion. I know this is wrong. Dale is a good man. But this feeling, it's overwhelming. This connection with Chad, it's unlike anything I've ever felt. A depth I didn't know existed. A depth she hadn't found with him. The words stung. One entry, written in Columbus, described their intimate moments with a raw honesty that made Dale's stomach clench. His vision blurred for a moment, the details forming a vivid, painful picture in his mind. The betrayal felt physical, a sharp pain in his chest, making it hard to breathe. He could almost smell the cologne from the journal, now mixed with the imagined scent of her perfume and the faint, sweet scent of infidelity. The journal went on to outline Brenda's plan. The Columbus trip was to be their last extended time together. She had to end things with Chad, not because she no longer felt for him, but out of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of what would happen if Dale found out. And the impending cruise they had planned together, a romantic getaway, loomed large in her thoughts. The cruise is so close. I need to get my head straight. I need to end this with Chad, for Dale's sake, for my own. But how do I let go of something so profound? Dale sat there, stunned, the small leather book a heavy weight in his hands. The silence of the house was absolute, yet inside his head, a cacophony of Brenda's words, her desires, her guilt, roared. His marriage, the life they had built together, was shattering around him, pieces falling silently, invisibly. He reread specific passages, desperate for a different interpretation, for some nuance he might have missed. Perhaps it was all metaphorical, an academic exercise, a deep friendship, but the words were too explicit, the emotions too raw. There was no other way to read it. There was no mistake. A wave of nausea washed over him, hot and bitter. It passed, leaving behind a burning anger that felt cold in its intensity. He stood up, the journal still clutched in his hand, and began to pace. From the bedroom to the living room, then back again. The familiar furniture, the photographs on the mantelpiece, the comfortable armchair where he'd watched TV just last night, all of it now felt alien, cold, imbued with the ghost of a hidden life. His first instinct was to confront her immediately, call her, demand an explanation, scream. But he stopped. What would that achieve? A panicked confession? More lies? A defensive attack? No. He needed to be calm. He needed to be prepared. He would wait for her to come home. With deliberate, measured movements, he returned to the nightstand. He carefully relocked the journal, hearing the soft click as the brass clasp re-engaged. He placed it back exactly as he had found it, beneath the small black travel bag. He looked around the room, scrutinizing every surface. Had he left any trace? His fingerprints? He picked up a polishing cloth from the dresser and began to wipe down the nightstand, the journal's cover, the small key he had used, then Brenda's jewelry box. A silent act of erasing his presence, of preserving the illusion, at least for now. The house was still, and he was alone with a truth he now knew. The next 2 days were a haze. Dale moved through his shifts at Anderson Electric like a ghost. He coiled wire, installed outlets, and ran conduits, his body performing the familiar motions while his mind remained a battlefield. The whirring of power tools, the casual banter of his coworkers, it all registered as distant noise, unable to penetrate the wall of thoughts that had consumed him since reading the journal. "Brenda back yet?" Gary Olson asked, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. It was Saturday afternoon. She get all those big ideas squared away? Dale managed a tight smile. Not yet. Should be back sometime tomorrow. She said it was a packed schedule. No time for sightseeing, I guess. The lie felt heavy in his mouth, a bitter taste. He kept his voice even, not betraying the tremor he felt deep inside. Gary nodded, oblivious, and turned back to the wiring diagram he was studying. Dale had avoided calling Brenda. He let her busy schedule excuse Stan, a convenient shield against a conversation he was not yet ready to have. His evenings were spent alone, the television a blur of colors and sounds he didn't register. The initial rage, hot and sharp, had slowly subsided, replaced by a profound sadness. A heavy sense of loss settled over him, the weight of what he had thought he had, what he now knew was a lie. He started analyzing Brenda's past behavior, sifting through months of memories. The nights she'd stayed late at the college, citing grading papers or unexpected meetings. The subtle shifts in her perfume, sometimes a lighter scent, sometimes a heavier one. The way she'd look at her phone, a quick glance, then put it face down. Little things, easily dismissed before, now coalesced into a chilling pattern, each subtle cue connecting to the journal's brutal revelations. The quiet moments of intimacy that had dwindled over the past few months. He now understood why. He walked through their house, a place that had once been a shared sanctuary, now just a collection of rooms. He considered his options. Divorce, clean and final. Exposure, tearing down Brenda's academic reputation, humiliating her publicly. Or a quiet plea, an attempt at reconciliation, a desperate hope that the love they once shared could somehow mend this fractured reality. Each option felt impossibly heavy. He sat at his old desk in the spare room, pulling up their financial statements online. Joint accounts, shared investments, the mortgage on the house. Their lives were intertwined, a complex web that went beyond just emotional ties. The practicalities added another layer of cold complexity to his emotional turmoil. How much would it cost? How messy would it be? He closed the browser, the numbers blurring. He scrolled through old text messages from Brenda on his phone, looking for any hint of genuine affection, a shared laugh, a loving word. He found mostly logistical messages, reminders about groceries, appointments, a perfunctory love you before bed. Now they felt empty, devoid of true meaning, a painful reflection of a relationship that had been crumbling beneath his feet while he was blind. The upcoming cruise, booked months ago, a grand gesture for their 10th anniversary, now loomed large, a dream tainted by deceit. He pictured the bright sun, the turquoise water, Brenda by his side. The image was now tainted, poisoned by the knowledge of her infidelity. How could he stand on that deck, pretending, when he knew what she had done, what she had felt for another man? He thought about Chad Peterson, the younger man, the teaching assistant. The thought of confronting him sparked a fresh wave of anger, but it felt hollow, unproductive. What would he say? What would he do? The image of himself losing control, turning violent, was unsettling. He was not that man. He had to be smarter, calmer. He opened a new browser window, incognito. He typed in Infidelity Laws Ohio and divorce proceedings. He read through articles, legal FAQs, understanding the cold, bureaucratic process that lay ahead. Should he choose that path? It was all so clinical, so detached from the raw pain he felt. Dale resolved to maintain his composure when Brenda returned. No outbursts, no accusations without evidence. He would control the narrative, make her explain. He practiced conversations in his head, rehearsing imagined questions, preparing for her inevitable lies, her attempts to deflect. He would be calm, quiet, his voice even. The bitter resentment that had festered in him began to morph, hardening into a cold, unwavering resolve. He would face her, but not as the betrayed husband. He would face her as a man who knew the truth and who would demand it. The familiar crunch of tires on gravel sounded just after 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Dale was in the living room, staring out the window, practicing a calm he didn't feel. He watched Brenda's silver Honda pull into the driveway. She emerged from the car, carrying a small tote bag and her main suitcase, her posture light and energetic. She looked rested, almost radiant, the long drive from Columbus apparently having no effect on her. She unlocked the front door, her face breaking into a wide smile the moment she saw him. "Dale, you wouldn't believe the week I've had. So much to tell you." She walked across the living room, her arms open, and embraced him. He returned the hug, his arms stiff, his body unresponsive. Her touch, once a comfort, now felt like a complete fabrication, an intimate lie. He felt the brush of her hair against his cheek, smelled her familiar perfume, but it was tainted by the unfamiliar scent from the journal, a ghost of another man. She pulled back, her smile undimmed. The seminars were intense, truly eye-opening. We had the speaker from MIT, brilliant woman, talking about post-structuralist theory, and I swear I could have listened to her all day. My brain is just buzzing. She recounted anecdotes, details about lectures and workshops, her voice animated, her hands gesturing. Dale listened, his gaze fixed on her, each enthusiastic word a fresh layer of deceit. He knew the buzzing wasn't from academic theory. "Oh," she said, her eyes suddenly widening. "Did you find my small black travel bag? I was convinced I'd left it in the car." "It was on the dresser," Dale replied, his voice even, betraying nothing. "Right where you asked me to look." He watched her carefully. A faint flicker, almost imperceptible, passed through her eyes. Then she smiled again. "Of course," she said, a small laugh escaping her. "I must have just been so distracted. I actually bought a new sewing kit on Thursday morning, thinking I'd lost my old one. Isn't that silly?" Dale merely nodded. A new sewing kit. Another small, unnecessary lie, adding to the growing mound of untruths. He had prepared dinner, a simple chicken and roasted vegetables. He served it, and they sat at the kitchen table, the clinking of cutlery the loudest sound in the room. The awkward silence stretched, Brenda occasionally attempting to fill it with more seminar stories, Dale offering only monosyllabic responses. He cut a piece of chicken, his fork scraping against the plate. "I noticed your journal, Brenda," he said, his voice quiet, almost conversational. "It was on the dresser, right next to that travel bag you'd left." Brenda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Her shoulders stiffened, almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that old thing?" she said, attempting a light tone. "Just some academic notes, really. Nothing exciting. I must have left it out in a rush." Her eyes, for a brief moment, darted to his, then away. "I see," Dale said, taking a slow sip of water. "How was your work week, Dale? Anything interesting happen at Anderson Electric?" She tried to change the subject, her question a transparent attempt to steer him away. "Nothing much," he replied, placing his glass down with a soft click. He looked directly at her, his eyes unblinking. "Just thinking about your work, actually. How's Chad Peterson doing? Your teaching assistant? Is he still as sharp as you said?" The color drained from Brenda's face, the spoon clattered against her plate, a small jarring sound in the silence. Her mouth opened, then closed. She stammered, "Chad? Oh, he's fine. Still working hard, for his graduation. He's very dedicated." She pushed a piece of chicken around her plate, avoiding his gaze. "Dedicated," Dale repeated, his voice still calm, a dangerous quiet in his tone. "That's a good word for it. Is that what you called it in your journal? Dedication? Or was it profound connection?" Brenda flinched as if struck. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock, then panic. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My journal? I read it, Brenda," Dale stated, his gaze unwavering. "Every word. About Chad Peterson. About the intellectual connection. About the Columbus seminars being a perfect cover." He listed the details, each one a pinpoint of light illuminating her deception, letting her know the full extent of his knowledge. "About how you had to end things before our cruise." Her initial shock gave way to a frantic denial. "No, it's not what you think, Dale. It's just academic reflections. You don't understand." Her voice rose, desperation creeping in. "He's just my assistant. It was nothing, just words." Dale reached down, his hand sliding under the table. He produced the small, leather-bound journal. He placed it on the table between them, the brass clasp already open. He had found a page, a particularly damning entry from Columbus, and laid it open, face up. "Just words, Brenda?" he asked, his voice still unnervingly quiet. "Or costly choices?" He gestured to the open page. "Why don't you read this out loud from all over me? Explain what it means." The chicken, the vegetables, the careful dinner he had prepared lay untouched. The table, once a symbol of their shared life, had become an altar to her betrayal. Her face crumpled, her denial giving way to choked sobs. The dinner, and with it, their marriage, collapsed into accusations and tears, a wreckage of honesty and deceit. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Brenda stared at the open journal on the kitchen table, her own handwriting a silent, damning witness. The last vestiges of her composure shattered. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as sobs racked her body. "Dale, I'm so sorry," she choked out, her voice muffled, thick with tears. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I truly didn't." Her confession spilled out, a torrent of words mixed with ragged breaths. Regret mingled with fear, and a desperate plea for him to understand. She tried to explain it all, fumbling for justifications. "I felt so lonely, Dale. You were always so busy with work, and I just felt overlooked, like I was fading. And Chad, he just paid attention. He listened. He made me feel seen." She lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes wide and pleading. "It was just an escape, a fantasy. It didn't mean anything real." Dale listened, his face a mask of stone. Every explanation she offered, every desperate plea felt like another betrayal. Her loneliness, her feeling of being overlooked. Had he been so blind? Or had she simply chosen not to see him? "How long, Brenda?" he asked, his voice low, flat. "How long has this escape been going on?" She hesitated, then mumbled, "A few months. Since after Christmas, really." It started so innocently, just talking. And the places, he pressed, his gaze piercing. The coffee shops, the late night calls, the Columbus trip, where you had uninterrupted time. She winced, fresh tears welling in her eyes. It was only a few times, Dale, I swear. And Columbus, that was the last time. I was going to end it. I really was. I wrote it in the journal, didn't I? It was a mistake, a temporary lapse. I know it was wrong. I was going to stop. He scoffed, a short, bitter sound. A temporary lapse? You planned it, Brenda. You engineered this trip, all the while knowing it was a lie to me. You wrote about profound connection and exhilarating moments. You lied to my face every day for months. And now you expect me to believe it was just a mistake you were about to fix? His voice hardened. What about the spring break cruise, Brenda? Our 10th anniversary? Was that just going to be another opportunity for you to play house while you secretly clung to your profound connection with a college kid? No, she cried, reaching across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to touch his arm. He recoiled slightly. Please, Dale, please forgive me. I'll do anything. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll quit my job if I have to. We can go to counseling. I love you, Dale. Our marriage, our life, it means everything to me. I don't know who you are anymore, Brenda, he said, his voice quiet, almost mournful. The anger still simmered, but it was overshadowed by a profound disillusionment. The woman I married, she wouldn't do this. She wouldn't lie to me like this. She wouldn't plan something so cold-blooded. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? I haven't slept properly in days. Every conversation, every look, every small detail, I've been running it through my head, trying to make sense of it. The anxiety, the dread, it's been crushing. Brenda's pleas intensified, her voice growing hoarse. I can fix this, Dale. Just give me a chance. Please, we can work through this. We have to. But Dale remained unmoved. The trust, once an invisible foundation, was now irrevocably shattered. He felt cold, detached, observing her desperation as if from a distance. I need time, Brenda, he said, his gaze fixed on the wall behind her. Space, I can't even look at you right now without seeing him. He paused, taking a slow, deep breath. Our marriage as it stands is on the brink. I need to figure out what happens next, and I can't do that with you in our bedroom. Her face crumpled again, a fresh wave of tears. She knew what he meant. The guest room? She whispered. Yes, he confirmed. For now. Brenda nodded slowly, defeated. The house, their home, was now divided. The untouched dinner on the table grew cold, a silent witness to the unraveling of their shared life. The Miller home became a place of tense silence in the days that followed. The guest room, once a rarely used space, now served as Brenda's temporary quarters. Interactions were limited to clipped, necessary exchanges, usually about groceries or the utilities. The air hung heavy with unspoken words, but Dale maintained his distance, his resolve hardening with each passing hour. He met his closest friend Jim for coffee at their usual diner. Jim, a plumber Dale had known since high school, listened with a quiet gravity as Dale recounted the story, omitting few details. Damn, Dale, Jim said, shaking his head. I'm sorry, man. That's a rough hand you've been dealt. Jim, having been through a messy divorce himself years ago, offered practical advice. You need to protect yourself. Legally, I mean. Get ahead of it. Don't let her control the narrative if it goes that way. Taking Jim's advice, Dale contacted Miss Peterson, a local attorney known for her straightforward approach. He sat in her sterile office discussing divorce proceedings and the division of their shared assets. The details were clinical, almost mundane, yet each point discussed felt like another nail in the coffin of his marriage. Ms. Peterson was efficient, outlining the process with a detached professionalism that Dale appreciated. Brenda, observing Dale's continued silence and his increasingly guarded demeanor, began to realize the severity of his resolve. She left notes on the kitchen counter, brief apologies, pleas for him to talk, to consider counseling. He collected them without reading, tossing them into the trash. She knew he had contacted an attorney. He made no effort to hide his calls, occasionally speaking in hushed tones when she was in the vicinity. The potential impact on her career, her carefully built reputation as a college professor, began to weigh heavily on his share. Still reeling from the betrayal, Dale wrestled with another decision: exposing Chad Peterson to the college administration. It felt vindictive, yet also necessary. A wrong needed to be righted. Consequences needed to be felt. He retrieved the journal, its small, dark form now a symbol of both her betrayal and his leverage. He carefully photocopied the most damning pages, the ones detailing the affair, the profound connection, the uninterrupted time in Columbus. He highlighted names, dates, and explicit phrases. He then scheduled a meeting with Dean Davies, the head of Brenda's faculty. He kept his purpose vague over the phone, simply stating he needed to discuss a sensitive matter concerning Professor Sutton. Brenda's panic grew. She noticed the photocopied papers, glimpsed the college letterhead on a document he left on his desk. The reality of public shame, of professional repercussions, started to close in. Her job, her identity was at risk. One evening, as Dale was charging his phone, a text message arrived. It was from an unfamiliar number, but the content made his blood run cold. "Hey, Professor, just thinking about our Columbus connection. Still buzzing from it. Can't wait till you're back on campus. CP." CP, Chad Peterson. Unaware, oblivious, still sending casual text, believing their secret was safe. That settled it. Dale decided to proceed. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a breach of professional conduct, an abuse of power, a direct threat to the integrity of the institution. It was about seeking justice in his own quiet, deliberate way. The meeting with Dean Davies was brief and chilling. The dean, a portly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, listened with a growing look of alarm as Dale, calm and collected, presented the photocopied journal entries. "As you can see, Dean," Dale said, his voice level, "this isn't just a personal matter. This is about a professor, my wife, engaging in an affair with a teaching assistant, a student, and using college resources and events as a cover." Dean Davies picked up the copies, his eyes scanning the highlighted passages. His face, usually placid, tightened. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice grave, "this is a very serious accusation, a profound breach of ethics." He looked up, meeting Dale's gaze. "I assure you we will conduct a thorough and immediate investigation. The college's reputation and its responsibility to its students is paramount." Dale nodded, a grim satisfaction settling in his gut. The consequences were now cascading, beyond his control, beyond Brenda's ability to stop. He had lit a match, and the fire was beginning to spread. The news of the investigation into Professor Brenda Sutton and her teaching assistant, Chad Peterson, moved through the college like wildfire. The hushed whispers in the faculty lounge, the quick glances in the hallways, the sudden tension in departmental meetings, it was impossible to contain. Within days, Brenda received an official letter. She was placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation, her career now hanging by a thread. Chad Peterson also faced immediate consequences. His suspension from academic duties left his future and his reputation severely damaged. Dale, meanwhile, moved forward with the divorce. Ms. Peterson, his attorney, handled the filings with brisk efficiency. As the legal process unfolded, Brenda, feeling the walls close in, became increasingly acrimonious. Her initial pleas for reconciliation morphed into bitter accusations, fueling the already tense atmosphere in the house. Brenda's professional and social life began to unravel. Calls from colleagues ceased. Her closest friends, many of whom were also acquaintances of Dale, distanced themselves, unsure how to navigate the fallout. Her academic dreams, once so central to her identity, crumbled under the weight of the investigation. The local college, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison. A thick envelope arrived in Dale's mailbox, bearing the letterhead of a prominent downtown law firm. It was from Brenda's attorney, a formal response signaling a fight over assets, the division of their property, the shared life now reduced to spreadsheets and legal arguments. It added a new layer of financial strain to his already immense emotional burden. He scheduled an appointment with Miss Peterson, the paperwork feeling heavier than any toolbox he'd ever carried. To cope with the trauma, Dale started attending counseling sessions twice a week. He sat in a small, quiet room trying to articulate the crushing weight of betrayal, the anger, the profound confusion. He talked about rebuilding his sense of self, of reclaiming the man he was before the lies. It was slow, painful work, but he knew it was necessary. Brenda, cornered and desperate, oscillated between raw emotion. Some days she would leave long, tearful voicemails, begging him to talk, to consider a future. Other days she would confront him in the kitchen, her eyes blazing with anger, blaming him for ruining her life, for destroying everything. Dale, however, maintained his resolve. The deep sense of betrayal, the need for accountability, fueled him. He listened, usually in silence, then walked away. There was nothing more to say. The college investigation concluded a month later. The findings were swift and decisive. Chad Peterson was expelled. Brenda's professorship was formally revoked, her contract terminated. The college issued a terse press release citing serious ethical violations by a faculty member involving a student. The local paper ran a sanitized but recognizable story. The details were vague, referring to a faculty-student ethics violation at the local college. But anyone familiar with Brenda's position knew exactly who it was about. Dale read it over his morning coffee, the headlines stark and unforgiving. He watched Brenda's public fall, a complex mix of vindication and profound sadness stirring within him. This wasn't a celebration, it was the aftermath of destruction. The divorce settlement became a harsh reality, dividing their once shared life into cold legal terms. The house, their joint savings, the care, even small mementos. Everything was assigned a monetary value, split or sold. It was a sterile, unforgiving process that left both of them diminished. Dale reflected on the pay-the-price aspect of the affair. Brenda had paid dearly, losing her career, her reputation, her marriage. Chad Peterson had paid, his academic future derailed. But Dale recognized that he too bore scars. The loss of trust, the shattered illusions, the quiet erosion of his belief in the solidity of things. Everyone paid a price, some more visible than others. Months turned into seasons. The legal paperwork, the relentless back and forth between attorneys, finally concluded. The divorce was finalized. Dale sold the house, the one filled with so many memories, both good and now irrevocably tainted. He moved into a smaller, simpler home on the outskirts of town, a place that felt clean, unburdened by the weight of a fractured past. Brenda, unable to endure the shame and the professional fallout that had engulfed her, left town. Her name simply vanished from the local directory, her presence fading from Dale's immediate world. He heard whispers, vague rumors through mutual acquaintances that she had gone to live with a distant relative in another state, attempting to rebuild her life away from the scrutiny and judgment. Chad Peterson, too, attempted to restart his academic career elsewhere, but the stain on his record proved persistent, following him like a shadow. Dale continued his therapy, the small, quiet room a sanctuary where he slowly, painfully began to heal. He learned to articulate the trauma, the anger, the profound sense of loss. He worked on rebuilding his ability to trust, a fragile skill that had been shattered. He reconnected with old friends like Jim and spent more time with his sister and her family, gradually rebuilding a support system that had fractured during the crisis. He picked up new hobbies, woodworking in his garage, long walks along the riverbank, finding solace in the quiet focus, in the rhythmic motions. He began to explore possibilities for his future, a future he hadn't imagined just months ago. He often reflected on the moral consequences of infidelity. It wasn't just Brenda who paid. It wasn't just Chad. The damage spread outwards, a ripple effect touching everyone, including him, his friends, their families. It was a stark lesson in the widespread damage caused by one person's choices. One quiet afternoon, he drove by Brenda's old college campus. The building still stood, solid and imposing. Students walked across the manicured lawns, their faces earnest, their backpacks slung over shoulders. He saw new faculty faces, felt the familiar, quiet hum of student life. There was a sense of detachment, a strange sense of closure as he watched, an observer to a world that was no longer his. He sold the cruise tickets, the anniversary trip now a relic of a life that no longer existed. He redirected the funds towards a solo trip, a journey of self-discovery to a national park out west, a place he'd always wanted to see. It would be a time for quiet reflection, for simply being. He learned to forgive. Not necessarily Brenda, not in the way one might forgive a minor transgression, but he found a way to forgive himself. For the pain he endured, for the life he lost, for the part of him that had been so easily deceived. It wasn't about excusing her actions, but about releasing the bitterness that had taken root within him. He understood that paying the price extended beyond tangible losses, the house, the home, the reputation. It encompassed the unseen burdens of betrayal, the erosion of trust, the quiet moments of doubt, the deep, persistent ache of a broken heart. In his solitude, in the rhythm of his work, in the steady quiet of his new home, Dale found a quiet strength. It was the resilience he had always known existed in the Midwestern spirit, a stubborn refusal to give up, a quiet determination to keep moving forward. The memories of Brenda and the affair were still there, a dull ache rather than a raw wound, but they no longer defined him. Dale looked towards a new horizon, scarred but whole, ready to face the quiet uncertainties of a life rebuilt. He found a semblance of peace, the lesson learned, the price paid, and a path forward, however quiet.